Imagine if I told you that the so-called lost years of Jesus, those quiet, puzzling years between his youth and his ministry, were never truly missing. Suppose the truth had been safeguarded high in the mountains of Africa, preserved in ancient scrolls penned in tongues far older than Latin, hidden not by history's decay but by the blind spots of Western tradition. This is not mere history, it is sacred memory, protected by one of the oldest Christian communities on earth. Unshaken by colonizers and passed down with unwavering devotion, Ethiopia may hold the key to a forgotten phase of Christ's life. Long before the world hailed him as the Messiah, before the Jordan baptism or the Sermon on the Mount, there lived a boy, divine, radiant, and wise beyond human grasp. That story still breathes in Ethiopia. The Gospels of the New Testament leave a sudden silence in Jesus' biography between ages 12 and 30. The last glimpse we see is in Luke 2:41-52, where a young Jesus astonishes Jerusalem's temple elders during the Passover with his unmatched wisdom. Yet following that temple episode, the story of Jesus vanishes into nearly 20 silent years. This era, often called the hidden years or silent years, offers no biblical record of his teenage life, young adulthood, or the journey that shaped him into the teacher who would later change the world. This profound gap has stirred endless debate and given rise to writings that attempt to fill the silence. Though the canonical Gospels remain quiet, apocryphal accounts and ancient historical works, many deliberately excluded from mainstream doctrine, seek to illuminate this mysterious stage. Among the most captivating sources stands the Ethiopian Bible, regarded by many as the earliest full biblical canon preserved through time. Still cherished by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, this sacred text contains stories, spiritual reflections, and miraculous events from Jesus' undocumented years. Unlike other Christian traditions influenced heavily by colonization, Ethiopia embraced Christianity centuries earlier, preserving a scripture with an authenticity and depth older than most Western institutions. Ethiopia occupies a unique position in sacred history, not only for its deep spiritual roots but also for being one of the rare African nations to withstand colonization. Because of this independence, the country safeguarded manuscripts, rituals, and relics without foreign alteration or suppression. Its Bible, written in the ancient Ge'ez language, includes 88 books, far surpassing the 66 of the King James Bible. These added texts feature apocryphal writings, extended Old Testament accounts, and spiritual narratives absent in mainstream Christianity. Unlike many cultures that embraced Christianity through missionary efforts, Ethiopia's faith has been homegrown since at least the 4th century AD, if not earlier. This unbroken continuity, free from colonial distortion, preserved the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as one of the oldest and most authentic Christian traditions. For more than 1,600 years, Ethiopia's scriptures and oral heritage have endured with remarkable stability, offering scholars a rare glimpse into early Christian thought and the hidden years of Jesus. Cloaked in mystique, Ethiopia is also renowned for its claim to house the Ark of the Covenant. Though mainstream archaeology remains silent on its existence, Ethiopian tradition firmly holds that the Ark rests in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum. This belief draws heavily from the Kebra Nagast, an ancient Ethiopian chronicle that ties the nation directly to the lineage of biblical Israel. Within its pages, it is said that the Ark of the Covenant was carried to Ethiopia by Menelik, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Though that legend deserves its own exploration, it highlights how deeply Ethiopia is bound to biblical traditions. These connections have long reinforced the legitimacy of Ethiopia's expanded biblical canon within its own heritage. Regarding the hidden years of Christ, the Ethiopian scriptures offer more than theological musings. They represent a cultural legacy preserved with care. The notion that the early life of Jesus is safeguarded in these writings is not idle speculation, but part of a living tradition guarded in monasteries and sustained through oral transmission for centuries. The Ethiopic Bible includes works that Western Christianity abandoned, dismissed, or labeled as apocrypha, yet they remain central within Ethiopia's enduring faith. Among these texts are the Book of Enoch, the Ascension of Isaiah, and several infancy Gospels that reveal glimpses of Christ's early development. The Book of Enoch in particular was highly regarded in the first centuries of Christianity, referenced even by figures such as Tertullian, but was eventually excluded from the Western canon by later church councils. In Ethiopia, however, it has remained a legitimate part of Holy Scripture, offering profound insights into Christian eschatology as well as the divine ancestry and early life of Jesus. Unlike the King James Version, compiled in 1611 by nearly 50 scholars under King James I, shaped by politics and doctrine, the Ethiopian canon reflects a much older body of writings that evolved naturally within the culture. It preserves oral traditions and sacred texts that circulated within Christian communities shortly after Christ's death. This contrast reveals that many writings labeled Apocrypha in the West were still revered in Ethiopia as sacred truths. Contrary to the common misconception that Christianity reached Africa through colonizers, Ethiopia's Christian heritage dates back to the 4th century, when it became the state religion, long before Rome officially embraced the faith. This perspective is reinforced by accounts from Cosmas Indicopleustes, a 6th century monk and traveler who chronicled the flourishing Christian traditions in Aksum, the ancient Ethiopian empire. His writings depict a community already rich with churches, theological discussions, and safe havens for believers fleeing persecution in foreign lands. Such records place Ethiopia not as a distant recipient of Christianity, but as one of its earliest centers. Ethiopian Christians were not passive inheritors of the faith. They were active architects and guardians of early doctrine and mysticism. Their safeguarding of writings that portrayed Jesus' youth as radiant with divine authority, miraculous healing, and profound wisdom reveals the depth of this heritage. It also highlights how Western Christianity's narrative of Christ is fragmentary when divorced from these parallel traditions. Remarkably, in 2010, researchers uncovered an illuminated gospel composed in Ge'ez, the ancient South Semitic tongue still preserved in Ethiopian liturgy today. The manuscript surfaced in a secluded monastery, resting high on a mountain that remained untouched by the advances of modernity. Its unearthing reinforced the belief that Ethiopia safeguarded a genuine form of early Christian faith. Within its pages are brilliant symbolic illustrations and writings absent from Western Bibles, shedding light on ancient perspectives of Jesus' life, especially his early years. In contrast to the sparse accounts of the Synoptic Gospels, these Ge'ez scriptures present Jesus as aware of his divine role from childhood. They portray a messianic self-awareness long before baptism, suggesting his mission was recognized from the very beginning. The colorful imagery also offers scholars a window into how Ethiopian believers viewed Christ, not merely as a prophet or redeemer, but as an eternal presence whose authority shone from birth. Among Ethiopia's treasured writings are the infancy Gospels, which recount miraculous episodes of Jesus' youth. One celebrated tale describes him shaping birds from clay and breathing life into them, a profound act of divine creativity. Though also mentioned in other apocryphal texts like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, its preservation and reverence within Ethiopian Christianity reveal it was honored as authentic testimony to Christ's divine nature from his earliest days. Although excluded from most Western biblical texts, these narratives were never dismissed as legend in Ethiopia. They were embraced as part of both oral tradition and sacred scripture by a devoted Christian community that believed Christ's power was present long before his 30th year. Accounts describe him healing wounded laborers, assisting Joseph the carpenter, and even restoring life to the dead. Stories that expand the picture of his spiritual mission and hint at how his public ministry was shaped in the hidden years. Some of the most striking Ethiopian traditions portray Jesus wielding authority over mortality itself. In one tale, a child who angered him suddenly collapsed lifeless, but through Jesus' compassion was revived once again. Such stories depict not only a miraculous child, but also a figure balancing human emotions with divine force. Though absent from the mainstream canon, these accounts form a vibrant layer of early Christian imagination, revealing a Christ full of mystery, awe, and heavenly authority from his youth, elements largely missing from the historically restrained Synoptic Gospels. Within these accounts, Ethiopian Christianity preserves a complete vision of Christ, portraying him as both human and divine from his birth to his resurrection. Whereas the Western Church primarily emphasized his ministry years, his baptism, miracles, parables, crucifixion, and rising again, the Ethiopian perspective calls us to recognize the holiness of his entire existence, including the mysterious years the Bible leaves untold. This broader story deepens our grasp of Jesus by blending his spiritual purpose with lived experience and cultural heritage. Ultimately, the hidden years remain one of history's greatest enigmas. Yet Ethiopia's scriptures and traditions offer a rare window into a faith that reveres every stage of his life, his childhood, wisdom, and divine mission. They encourage us to look beyond the established canon and value the diverse ways faith and history intertwine across civilizations. Thank you for walking with us through this journey into Christ's missing years. To discover more about Ethiopia's sacred legacy and its role in Christian history, make sure to subscribe and continue alongside us.